Turn off the lights. Lock the door. What you are about to hear did not happen in some distant country in some forgotten decade. It happened in Orlando, Florida, in a middle-class neighborhood with manicured lawns and swimming pools. It happened to a 2-year-old girl with curly brown hair and a laugh that her grandmother said sounded like music. Her name was Caylee Anthony. She was born on the 9th of August, 2005. She weighed 7 pounds and 1 ounce. She had her mother's eyes. She had her grandfather's stubborn chin. She loved a stuffed animal she called Pooh Bear. She loved to sing the alphabet song, though she always skipped the letter L. She loved her grandmother, Cindy, who cared for her like a second mother. She loved swimming in the backyard pool. She loved her big-wheel tricycle. She was 2 years and 10 months old when her short life came to an end. I am Miles Ghost Hunter. And for the next 40 minutes, I am going to walk you through 31 days of silence. 31 days during which a little girl was missing in a wooded lot less than a quarter mile from her own home. 31 days during which her mother, Caylee Anthony, 22 years old, did not call the police, did not call hospitals, did not call anyone. Instead, she went to nightclubs. She entered a contest. She shopped at Target. She borrowed money from friends. She lied to her own parents for a month. And on the 18th day of her daughter being missing, the 18th day, Caylee Anthony walked into a tattoo parlor in Orlando, rolled up her sleeve, and asked the artist to ink 2 words onto her shoulder in flowing Italian script. Bella Vita. The beautiful life. The beautiful life. While her daughter was missing, unfound, somewhere in the Florida summer, Caylee Anthony had the words, "the beautiful life," inked onto her own skin. This is not a story about grief. This is a story about an absence where grief should have been. And it is a story about 12 Americans who sat in a courtroom in the summer of 2011, listened to every piece of evidence, and voted to let her walk out the front door, a free woman. Before we begin, you need to understand something. I am not here to tell you what the jury should have done. I am here to tell you what happened, step by step, statement by statement, evidence by evidence. And when we are finished, you will have to decide for yourself what to make of a case that still divides a country. Let me take you back, not to the beginning of Caylee's life. We will get there. I want to take you first to a moment in July of 2008, because that is the moment when the lies could no longer hold. The date is Tuesday, July 15th, 2008. The time is 3:17 in the afternoon. A dispatcher at the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Florida picks up an incoming call. The voice on the other end belongs to Caylee Anthony, 48 years old, a registered nurse, Caylee's grandmother. Cindy's voice is shaking. She is trying to stay calm but failing. She tells the dispatcher that her granddaughter has been missing. The dispatcher asks for how long. There is a pause on the line, a long pause, and then Cindy says words that no emergency dispatcher in America had ever heard before in quite this way. 31 days, 31 days, not 31 minutes, not 31 hours, 31 days. The grandmother continues. She says her daughter Caylee has had the child the entire time. She says Caylee finally came home the night before, after Cindy and her husband George tracked her down. She says the car that Caylee had been driving, a white Pontiac Sunfire, was just retrieved from a tow yard. And she says the car has a strange odor, a very bad odor. She says she opened the trunk and it was empty, but the smell was overwhelming. She says there was a bag of trash in the trunk, and she says, and her exact words were played in court, she says it smells like something has been in that car, something that should not have been there. The dispatcher asks to speak with Caylee. Caylee gets on the phone. Her voice is calm, her voice is flat. Her voice, listening to it today on the archived recordings, sounds like someone ordering a pizza, not someone whose 2-year-old daughter has been missing for 31 days. Caylee tells the dispatcher that Caylee is with her nanny. The nanny's name, she says, is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, but Caylee calls her Zanny, Zanny the nanny. Casey says Zanny has had Caylee since June 16th. Casey says she has been trying to find Zanny for 31 days. Casey says she did not call police because she was conducting her own investigation. Her own investigation. A 22-year-old unemployed woman with no investigator training, no law enforcement background, and no resources was, according to her own statement, conducting her own investigation into the disappearance of her 2-year-old child. For 31 days. While going to nightclubs, while shopping, while getting a tattoo. Detectives arrived at the Anthony home on Hope Spring Drive within the hour. What they found was not a grieving family. What they found was chaos. Cindy Anthony was alternating between hysterical crying and cold rage. George Anthony, Casey's father, a former police officer from Ohio, was pacing the living room, demanding answers from his daughter. And Casey was on the couch, arms crossed, face blank, answering questions like a teenager being lectured about a missed curfew. Within 24 hours, Caylee Anthony had been placed under arrest. The charges at that early stage were child neglect and providing false information to law enforcement. The more serious charge would come later. But Caylee, where was Caylee? Nobody knew. And for 5 more months, nobody would know. Before we follow the detectives down that path, I need you to understand who Caylee Marie Anthony was. Because in the years that followed, in the media coverage, in the courtroom, in the endless talk shows and the tabloid covers, something happened. Caylee became a headline. Caylee became a case number. Caylee became a symbol. And in becoming all of those things, Caylee almost stopped being seen as a little girl. She was a little girl. She lived with her mother Casey at the home of her grandparents, George and Cindy Anthony, at 4937 Hope Spring Drive in Orlando. A modest single-story home with a lemon tree in the front yard and a pool in the back. Cindy was a registered nurse. George was a retired police sergeant from Ohio who had moved to Florida years earlier. They were, by every account of neighbors and family friends, devoted grandparents. They kept a college savings account for Caylee. They kept photographs of her on every wall. Cindy, in particular, was known to drop everything, meals, phone calls, errands, the moment Caylee toddled into the room. Caylee went to a local preschool part-time. She was friends with another little girl named Brianna. Her grandfather, George, would take her to the Jefferson Davis Park on Saturdays. She had a Dora the Explorer backpack. She had a pair of pink sneakers with Velcro straps. She had a laminated photograph of her mother that she carried in her little plastic purse. The last confirmed sighting of Caylee Anthony took place on June 15th, 2008, Father's Day. Her great-grandfather, Alex Plessia, was being visited at his nursing home. Caylee was there. There are photographs from that day. In them, she is laughing. She is wearing a pink shirt and white shorts. Her hair is in pigtails. She is being held by her great-grandfather. Behind her, her mother Casey is smiling. It is the last photograph of Caylee Anthony that we have. The next day, June 16th, Casey left the Anthony home with Caylee. She told her mother Cindy that she was taking Caylee to the nanny. She said she was going to work. Cindy kissed Caylee goodbye. She told her to be a good girl. Caylee waved. She said, "Bye-bye." That is the last moment anyone in her family ever saw Caylee Marie Anthony. Casey returned to the house that evening, alone. When Cindy asked where Caylee was, Casey said Caylee was with Zanny, the nanny. She said Caylee was going to stay overnight. Cindy thought this was unusual. Caylee had never spent the night with this nanny before, but Casey was the mother. Casey had been lying to her parents about many things for many years, lying about a job she did not have, lying about money, lying about where she went at night. But Casey was still the mother. Cindy accepted the story. The story would not end for 31 days. Now, let me tell you what Casey did on day one. Day 1, June 17th, 2008. Caylee has been gone approximately 24 hours. Casey is at the home of her then-boyfriend, Anthony Lazaro, a young man who lived in a high-rise apartment in downtown Orlando. Anthony would later testify. He would say that Casey arrived that evening, told him she was staying over, and acted normally. No tears, no panic. They watched a movie. They went to bed. Day 3, June 19th. Casey goes shopping. She buys shorts and a top at a store called Target. Surveillance video, which would later become a prosecution exhibit, shows her walking down the aisle. She is not crying. She is not on the phone. She is checking price tags. Day 5, June 21st. Casey goes to a nightclub in Orlando called Fusion Ultra Lounge. That night, Fusion was hosting a contest. Caylee Anthony entered it. Photographs from that night. Photographs taken by club patrons, photographs that would eventually appear on front pages across America, show Casey on a dance floor, her arms raised above her head. Her face lit up with what witnesses described as pure euphoria. She is wearing a blue dress. She is laughing. She is drinking. Day 9, June 25th. Casey tells her friend Amy Heisenga that she cannot go home because the house has a strong, unpleasant odor she cannot bear. This is 9 days after Caylee was last seen. Day 14, June 30th. Casey's Pontiac Sunfire runs out of gas. She abandons it in a parking lot at an Amscot check-cashing store off of East Colonial Drive. She calls her boyfriend Anthony to pick her up. She leaves the car there. She does not mention a missing daughter. Day 16, July 2nd. Casey is at Anthony's apartment with a group of friends. One of the friends, a young woman named Natalie Lerner, would later testify that Casey spent the evening laughing and drinking. Natalie asked Casey where Caylee was. Casey said Caylee was with Zanny. Natalie later said Casey seemed completely relaxed. Day 18, July 4th, Independence Day. Casey goes to a 4th of July party. Photographs from that night show her smiling broadly, holding a red Solo cup, surrounded by friends. And then, either that night or within a day of it, Caylee Anthony walks into Bayview Tattoo in Orlando. The artist who inked her was named Bobby Williams. Bobby would later take the stand. He would describe a young woman, calm, focused, who asked for 2 words in Italian, Bella Vita, the beautiful life. He asked her what it meant to her. She said it described how she was feeling. Her daughter had been missing for 19 days. I want you to sit with that. I want you to close your eyes, if you can. And I want you to picture a mother, any mother you know, a mother whose 2-year-old child has been missing for 18 days. I want you to imagine her in a tattoo parlor. I want you to imagine her lifting her sleeve. I want you to imagine her saying, without a tremor in her voice, I would like the words "the beautiful life" inked permanently onto my body. Now open your eyes. That is not a scene from a film. That is a court exhibit. That is a photograph that was admitted into evidence. That is a fact. Day 20, July 6th. Casey takes a checkbook from her friend Amy Heisenga without permission. Over the next few days, she forges checks totaling over $600. She uses the money to buy underwear. She uses the money to buy groceries. She uses the money to pay her boyfriend's rent share. Day 24, July 10th. The Amscot parking lot tow company reports the Pontiac Sunfire as an abandoned vehicle. They tow it to their yard. Day 30, July 15th. George Anthony drives to the Johnson's Wrecker tow yard. He has received a notice about the abandoned car. He arrives at the yard around 1 in the afternoon. The tow yard attendant, Simon Birch, walks out with him to retrieve the vehicle. As they approach the car, Simon Birch steps back. He would later testify. He said the odor hit them from 20 feet away. He said in his career at the tow yard, he had encountered this specific kind of smell before. He said he told George Anthony, right there in the parking lot, what he believed the source of the smell to be. George Anthony opened the trunk. The trunk was empty, except for a white plastic bag of trash. but the odor remained. George Anthony, a former police officer, said under oath that the smell inside that Pontiac Sunfire was, in his professional experience, the smell associated with human remains. George drove the car home. Cindy opened the trunk in the driveway. She would testify that the smell was so overwhelming she nearly became ill. Her hands were shaking. She called Casey's cell phone. Casey did not answer. She called again. No answer. She called Anthony Lazaro, the boyfriend, at his apartment. She demanded to know where her daughter was, where her granddaughter was, where Caylee was. Casey was brought home that night. Cindy stood in the living room and confronted her for hours. "Where is Caylee? Where is Caylee? Where is Caylee?" Casey said Caylee was with the nanny. "What nanny?" "Zanny. Zanny the nanny. Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez." "Give me her phone number." "I do not have it." "Give me her address." "I do not have it." "When did you last see Caylee?" 31 days ago. It was that night that Cindy Anthony picked up the phone and dialed 911. 3 times. The first 2 calls were hang-ups, Cindy panicking, trying to gather her thoughts. The third call is the one I described at the start. The call where grandmother told a dispatcher that her granddaughter had been missing for 31 days and that her daughter's car carried an overwhelming odor. 31 days. The investigation began that afternoon. Orange County Detective Yuri Melich was assigned as the lead. Yuri Melich, a methodical, experienced investigator, would later describe his first interviews with Caylee Anthony as some of the strangest experiences of his career. He said Caylee lied about almost everything, and the lies were not good lies. The lies were simple lies. The lies fell apart the moment you tested them. Caylee said she worked at Universal Studios as an event planner. She had worked there for years, she said. She took the detectives to Universal Studios. She walked them through the front gates. She walked them down a corridor. And then, about halfway down the corridor, she stopped. She turned around. She said, "I do not actually work here. I have not worked here in over 2 years." She said the nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, had an apartment at a place called the Sawgrass Apartments. Detectives went to Sawgrass Apartments. They checked every rental record going back 2 years. There had never been a tenant named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. The apartment number Caylee provided, apartment 210, had been vacant for months during the period when Caylee claimed to be dropping Caylee off there daily. Vacant. Dust on the counters. No child had ever set foot in that apartment in years. She said she dropped Caylee off at a park called J. Blanchard Park. Detectives canvassed J. Blanchard Park. They interviewed every regular. They pulled every piece of surveillance footage within a half-mile radius. No one had ever seen Caylee Anthony or Caylee Anthony at that park. Not once. She gave the names of co-workers at Universal Studios: Juliette Lewis, Jeffrey Hopkins, as people who could verify her employment and verify that they had met Caylee. Detectives ran the names. Juliette Lewis was an actress from California who had no connection to the Anthony family. Jeffrey Hopkins did not exist. There was no employee by that name at Universal Studios. There never had been. Every single thread the detectives pulled on came loose in their hands. Every alibi was smoke. Every name was a ghost. Caylee Anthony was a 22-year-old woman who had constructed an entire parallel reality: jobs, friends, nannies, daycare schedules, pediatrician appointments, and none of it existed. She had been lying to her parents for years, and now, with her daughter gone, the lies were all she had left. But here is where the story turns from a missing persons case into something graver. Because the detectives did not just have lies, they had the car. The Pontiac Sunfire was impounded as evidence. Forensic investigators from the Orange County Sheriff's Office processed it, and what they found in that trunk would become the spine of the prosecution's case. First, they deployed cadaver dogs, trained dogs whose sole job is to alert to the scent of human remains. 2 separate dogs, handled independently, were brought to the car. Both dogs alerted on the trunk. The first dog, named Jerris, sat down beside the trunk, the signal that he had detected the relevant scent. The second dog, brought in the next day, did exactly the same. Second, they sent air samples from the trunk to a lab at the University of Tennessee. The lab was run by Dr. Arpad Vass, one of the world's leading forensic chemists, specializing in post-mortem chemistry. Dr. Vass analyzed the chemical compounds present in the trunk air. He found levels of compounds, including chloroform, and a combination of volatile organic compounds associated with human remains, at concentrations he said were consistent with a scenario the prosecution was proposing. Third, they analyzed a strand of hair recovered from the trunk. The hair was consistent with Caylee Anthony's hair. And more significantly, it exhibited a dark band near the root, a characteristic, according to some forensic analysts, that can indicate the hair came from a person who was no longer living. Fourth, and this is the detail that would weigh heavily at trial, they examined the home computer, Caylee Anthony's laptop. In the months before Caylee's disappearance, someone using Casey's account had searched Google and other sites for the following terms: chloroform, how to make chloroform, neck breaking, how to make weapons out of household items, internal bleeding. Those searches were conducted in the Anthony family home, on days when Casey was there, some of them multiple times, 84 times, according to early analysis of the browser history, though that number would later be disputed by the defense, and the actual hit count for chloroform would be argued down to a much smaller number. But the searches existed. They were real. They were made. A mother who searches how to make chloroform. A mother whose daughter goes missing months later. A mother whose car, months after that, carries a specific odor and contains hair microscopically consistent with her daughter. The detectives had their theory. They did not yet have a recovered body. For 5 months, Florida searched. Volunteers in orange vests combed the swamps of Orange County. Self-proclaimed psychics offered visions. Cadaver dogs were brought to every reported sighting. Casey's friends were interviewed. Her ex-boyfriends were interviewed. Her MySpace messages were combed. A man named Roy Kronk, a meter reader for the Orange County Utilities, called the sheriff's office tip line 3 separate times in August of 2008. He said he had seen something suspicious in the woods near Suburban Drive, less than half a mile from the Anthony home. He said he had seen what looked like a skull. He was brushed off. Deputies looked. They did not find anything. Roy Kronk let it go. Months passed. Leaves fell. Rain came. Swamp water rose and receded. On December 11, 2008, Roy Kronk was back in the same wooded lot on Suburban Drive. He had stepped into the trees for a personal reason. He saw something. He walked closer. He used his meter-reading stick to nudge at a canvas laundry bag that was partially submerged in a few inches of water. A small, round object rolled out. A skull. A child's skull. Roy Kronk backed away. He called the sheriff's office. This time they came. This time they brought crime scene tape. This time they brought the FBI. The remains of Caylee Marie Anthony had been found, less than a quarter mile from the home where she was born. The scene was processed for weeks. What forensic investigators gathered tells a story that no parent should ever have to hear. The remains were skeletonized. The body had been wrapped in a white laundry bag, a bag identical to those used at the Anthony home. Inside the bag were the remains of a child's Winnie the Pooh blanket. The same Winnie the Pooh blanket pattern that Caylee had on her bed on Hope Spring Drive. Around the skull, strands of duct tape were found. 3 strips. The duct tape was a brand called Henkel, the same brand of duct tape that George Anthony used in his garage. The duct tape, according to the medical examiner, had been placed in a position that covered the mouth and nose of the child. Let me say that again, because the legal language and the clinical language can soften what actually happened. The duct tape was positioned across the face of a 2-year-old child, across her mouth, across her nose, 3 strips. A child cannot tear duct tape. A child cannot remove it. If the duct tape was placed on Caylee Anthony while she was alive, the outcome is unthinkable. If it was placed after the fact, someone placed it there deliberately. Also recovered at the scene was a small, heart-shaped piece of residue. What investigators believe to be adhesive from a heart-shaped sticker on the duct tape itself, a heart. On the tape covering a child's face. The medical examiner, Dr. Jan Garavaglia, made a formal ruling. Cause of death, undetermined. Because the remains were skeletonized, she could not rule on a specific mechanism, but she classified the manner of death officially. Homicide. She stated that there was no innocent explanation for a child's skeleton to be wrapped in a laundry bag and dumped in a swamp with duct tape on the face. She said that in her career, she had never seen an accidental death staged this way. Caylee Marie Anthony was, officially, a victim of homicide. Now, Caylee Anthony was charged with first-degree murder. The state of Florida announced it would seek the maximum penalty available under state law. Miles GhostHunter would like to pause here for a breath, because what is coming next is the trial. And the trial is where the story stops being about what happened and starts being about what 12 people in a jury box decided to believe. The trial of State of Florida versus Caylee Marie Anthony began on May 24, 2011. It lasted 6 weeks. It was televised, gavel to gavel, by every major cable news network in the United States. Nancy Grace of Court TV covered it nightly with an intensity that filled television screens from coast to coast. Nancy Grace had, from the earliest days of the case, referred to Caylee Anthony by a nickname that stuck. Tot Mom. Tot Mom. The name was shorthand. It was also a brand. And it made Caylee Anthony one of the most watched defendants in American history. The prosecution was led by Jeff Ashton and Linda Drain Burdick. They were veteran Florida prosecutors, methodical, prepared, armed with 3 years of investigation and hundreds of exhibits. Their theory was straightforward. Caylee Anthony no longer wanted to be a mother. She wanted to live a beautiful life, a bella vita, with her boyfriend, Anthony Lazzaro, free of the responsibility of a toddler. On the evening of June 16, 2008, in or near the Anthony family home, she rendered her daughter unconscious. She placed duct tape across her mouth and nose. Caylee did not survive. Caylee placed the body in a laundry bag, put the bag in the trunk of her Pontiac Sunfire, drove around with it for several days, and then left the bag in the wooded lot on Suburban Drive. Then she went out. The defense was led by a young, relatively unknown Orlando attorney named Jose Baez. Baez had been hired by the Anthony family. Baez had limited trial experience. He had never tried a capital case before. He was, by any measure, an underdog against a prosecution team with decades of combined experience. On the morning of May 24th, Jose Baez stood up to give his opening statement. What he said in the next 30 minutes changed the entire shape of the trial, and arguably, the entire outcome. Baez did not argue that Caylee Anthony had been kidnapped by Zanny, the nanny. He did not argue that Caylee had been somewhere else. He did not argue that there was reasonable doubt about the forensic evidence. He argued this: Caylee Anthony had not been harmed by anyone. Caylee Anthony had drowned. On the morning of June 16, 2008, Caylee had made her way out of the Anthony family home, reached the backyard swimming pool, fallen in, and drowned accidentally. Caylee had found her, and at that moment, according to Baez, Caylee had panicked. Not because she was cold, but because, Baez claimed, Caylee Anthony had suffered abuse by her father, George Anthony, from childhood. Baez claimed that George Anthony had taught Caylee from an early age to hide pain, to hide secrets, to keep family matters inside the family. And when Caylee pulled her daughter from the pool, George Anthony, according to Baez, had covered up the accident and disposed of the body. The duct tape was to stage the scene. The 31 days of lies were because Caylee had been conditioned by trauma. George Anthony, sitting in the courtroom, went pale. Cindy Anthony sobbed. The prosecution, caught off guard, sat frozen. Nobody in the courtroom, not the judge, not the reporters, not the jury, had heard this theory before that morning. It had not appeared in any pre-trial motion. It had not appeared in any deposition. The abuse theory would never be supported by any evidence during the trial. No witness corroborated it. No document supported it. George Anthony took the stand and denied it categorically, in tears. Caylee Anthony never took the stand herself. She exercised her Fifth Amendment right, and so no direct testimony on the alleged abuse ever came from her. The only source for the entire claim was Jose Baez's opening statement. But the seed had been planted. And in a jury room, seeds are all that matters. Over the next 6 weeks, the prosecution laid out its case. Meter reader Roy Kronk testified about finding the remains. Forensic experts testified about the trunk air analysis. Dr. Arpad Vass testified about the chloroform and the other compounds. Detective Yuri Melich testified about Caylee's lies. Amy Huizenga testified about the forged checks. Anthony Lazaro testified about the nights Caylee spent at his apartment while her daughter was, supposedly, with Zanny the nanny. A forensic artist laid an image of Caylee's skull over a photograph of her face, with the duct tape in position to demonstrate how the tape would have covered her airway. The defense attacked the science. They attacked the chain of custody. They argued that the chloroform levels could have come from other sources, cleaning products perhaps. They argued that the hair banding evidence was not scientifically reliable. They argued that cadaver dogs were not dependable. They argued that the Google searches had been made by Cindy Anthony, not by Caylee, a claim that Cindy tearfully adopted from the witness stand, though her own work records showed she was at her nursing job during many of the searches. And throughout the trial, Caylee Anthony sat silent, well-dressed, her hair neat, her posture straight. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she whispered to her attorneys. Sometimes, observers noted, she smiled. On July 5, 2011, after 11 hours of deliberation over less than 2 days, the jury of 7 women and 5 men returned to the courtroom. Judge Belvin Perry asked the foreperson if a verdict had been reached. The foreperson said yes. The clerk read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, not guilty. Gasps in the courtroom. Cindy Anthony clutching her husband's hand. On the charge of aggravated child abuse, not guilty. A sound like a collective intake of breath rippling through the gallery. On the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, not guilty. Caylee Anthony's attorney, Jose Baez, closed his eyes. Caylee Anthony's shoulders began to shake. She was crying. On 4 counts of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, guilty. 4 misdemeanors. 4 counts of lying. That was it. A mother who had reported no missing child for 31 days. A mother whose car had carried an overwhelming odor. A mother whose daughter had been found with duct tape across her face in a swamp behind her home. A mother who had, during those 31 days, gotten a tattoo that said "the beautiful life." That mother had just been acquitted of the most serious charges. Outside the Orange County Courthouse, the crowd that had been waiting for the verdict erupted. Not in celebration, in disbelief. People shouted, people wept, people carried signs that said "Justice for Caylee." A woman in the crowd fell to her knees and could not stand up. Men shouted at the courthouse doors. Strangers embraced each other in grief, and a chant began, low at first, then louder. Rolling through the summer heat. Justice for Caylee, justice for Caylee, justice for Caylee. No further justice came. On July 17, 2011, after serving time already accumulated during 3 years of pre-trial detention, Caylee Marie Anthony walked out of the Orange County Jail in the middle of the night. A private vehicle was waiting. She got in. She drove away. She has not returned to public life in any meaningful way since. Over the years that followed, Americans would ask the jury, publicly, privately, in books, in documentaries, how? How did you reach that verdict? Jurors gave interviews. Most of them said the same thing, in different words. We did not have a cause of death. We did not know how Caylee died. And without knowing how she died, we could not be certain, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Caylee had caused her death. That is the law. That is reasonable doubt. That is how the American system works. Is it justice? That is the question that never got answered. Caylee Marie Anthony is buried at Little Bethel Memorial Gardens in Orlando. Her grave is visited frequently by strangers, people who never knew her, who leave toys and flowers and handwritten notes. In the years after the verdict, legislators in several states passed what became known as Caylee's Law, statutes that made it a felony for a parent or guardian to fail to report a missing or deceased child within a short window of time. The law in Florida, had it existed in 2008, would have made Caylee Anthony's 31 days of silence a crime in itself. But Caylee's law came too late for Caylee. Caylee Anthony lives, as of this recording, a quiet life. She has given a handful of interviews. She has maintained in those interviews that she did not harm her daughter. She has suggested that her daughter drowned. She has changed elements of her story multiple times, even after the trial. She has never been charged again. Under the principle of double jeopardy, she can never be tried again for the death of Caylee Marie Anthony. Even if, tomorrow, she walked into a police station and confessed in detail, she could not be prosecuted. She walked into that courthouse a defendant. She walked out a free woman, and she will remain a free woman until the day she dies. 31 days of silence, 12 jurors, 0 convictions for the death of a child. That is the arithmetic of this case. That is what is left when the cameras are gone, and the crowds have gone home, and the tabloids have moved on to the next missing child. I am Miles Ghost Hunter. I do not render verdicts. I render the record. The record of this case says that a 2-year-old girl named Caylee, whose eyes were brown and whose laugh was described as music, was found wrapped in a laundry bag in a Florida swamp with duct tape across her face, a 1/4 mile from her own home. The record says that her mother got a tattoo while she was missing. The record says that 12 Americans listened to every word of evidence and decided they could not be certain what had happened in that house on Hope Spring Drive in the summer of 2008. The record is the record. You, watching this, must make your own peace with it, or, like most of us, refuse to. Next week, the courtroom moves from Orlando to Los Angeles. The defendant moves from an unknown young mother to the most famous running back in the history of American football. The glove is too small. The Bronco is on the freeway. And the verdict, once again, will shake a nation to its foundations. Miles Ghost Hunter, Episode 3, O.J. Simpson, the trial of the century. Do not look away.